The lecture hall smelled like old paper and recycled air. Dara sat in the back row, her fingers dancing across her data pad as the historian droned on about the Earth aggression event. She had heard this story 100 times before. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the humans and their terrible mistake 50 years ago. The peaceful exploration vessels approached the primitive planet with open communication channels, the historian said, his voice echoing off the stone walls. They broadcast friendship in 700 languages. They showed images of cooperation and trade, and the humans responded with violence. Dara looked up at the holographic display floating above the stage. It showed grainy footage of explosions in space, debris spinning through the darkness, and the names of 200 council personnel who died that day. She felt the familiar sadness wash over her. Such a waste, such unnecessary death. The historian continued his presentation, moving through slides that Dara could recite from memory. The humans had been frightened, he explained. They had never encountered alien life before. Their primitive minds could not comprehend the vastness of the galactic community, so they did what violent species always do when confronted with the unknown. They attacked. After the lecture ended, Dara made her way through the crowded corridors of the archive world. Her people, the Lumeri, were natural record keepers. Their 3 eyes could process multiple data streams simultaneously, and their eidetic memory made them perfect for archival work. She had been doing this job for 6 years now, cataloging the history of first contact events across the galaxy. The assignment waiting on her desk made her antennae twitch with excitement. The 50th anniversary of the Earth incident was approaching, and the Council wanted all classified files digitized and prepared for the memorial service. This was important work. This was history. Dara settled into her workstation and began pulling up the old files. Most were standard reports, communication logs, and personnel records. She worked through them methodically, her trained eye catching small details and cross-referencing dates. Everything seemed to match the official narrative perfectly. Then she opened the casualty list. 200 deaths. She had seen that number her entire life, but as she compared it to the ship manifest, something felt wrong. Peaceful exploration vessels had been small scientific craft, according to every historical record. Each one carried a crew of maybe 20 people, yet the casualty list showed deaths from 17 different ships. Dara pulled up the ship registry. Her middle eye focused on the vessel specifications, while her other 2 eyes scanned the crew assignments. The numbers did not add up. Some ships listed in the casualty reports were not even in the system on the day of the incident. Others showed crew sizes that contradicted the death counts. She dug deeper, her curiosity now fully awakened. The exploration vessels were supposed to be scientific research craft, but their equipment manifests told a different story. Military-grade stealth generators, advanced signal interception arrays, deep space surveillance pods. This was not exploration equipment. This was spy technology. The communication logs were even stranger. The official history said the Council ships had just arrived at Earth and immediately tried to make peaceful contact. But the logs showed something else entirely. They referenced observation data going back 12 years. 12 years of watching humans without their knowledge. 12 years of cataloging their communications, their military movements, their technological development. Dara felt her scales prickling with unease. This was not the story she had been told. This was not the peaceful first contact that had gone wrong. This was something else entirely. She found a file labeled Operation Silent Harvest buried deep in the classified section. Her access credentials should not have allowed her to see it at all, but some glitch in the system had left it exposed. She opened it, her heart's racing. The first few pages loaded slowly. They outlined a protocol for observing per-contact civilizations. The language was clinical and cold. Subject species, assessment parameters, integration readiness. It read like a manual for studying animals in a zoo. Then the file corrupted. Half the data turned into gibberish on her screen, fragments of text mixed with error codes, but she saw enough. Earth had been designated as an observation priority. Multiple surveillance networks had been established across their solar system. The humans were being watched, studied, cataloged like specimens under a microscope. Dara tried to access the rest of the file, but her terminal suddenly went dark. A message flashed. Across the screen in red letters, "Unauthorized access detected. Security has been notified." Her hands moved on instinct. She pulled out her personal data crystal and plugged it into the terminal. The device only had seconds before the system locked down completely. She copied everything she could: fragments of the Silent Harvest file, the ship manifests, the communication logs showing years of surveillance. The door to her office slid open. Two council security officers stood in the doorway, their expressions hard and professional. "Archivist Dara, you need to come with us," the taller one said. She pulled the data crystal free and slipped it into her sleeve pouch in one smooth motion. Her species had many pockets and folds in their clothing. The guards did not notice. "Of course," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Is there a problem?" "You accessed restricted files," the second guard said. "That data is classified for council intelligence eyes only." They escorted her through the archives, past rows of ancient records and humming servers. Other archivists watched her go, their expressions confused and concerned. Dara had never broken a rule in her life. She was the model employee, the one everyone trusted with the most sensitive materials. In the security office, a senior investigator explained that the files were corrupted, meaningless fragments left over from old database errors. There was nothing to see, nothing to worry about. Just a mistake in the filing system. He spoke in a soothing tone, the kind adults use with children who have stumbled into places they should not go. They released her 2 hours later with a formal warning in her file and a reminder about proper access protocols. She walked out of the building into the orange light of the setting sun, her mind racing. The official history was a lie. She could feel it in her bones, and now she had proof hidden in her pocket. 3 days passed before Dara felt safe enough to look at the data crystal again. She sat in her small apartment, curtains drawn, running every security scan she knew. Her paranoia felt justified after what happened at the archives. The council did not hand out warnings lightly. The data crystal contained fragments, pieces of a puzzle that made less sense the more she examined them. She needed help from someone who understood the old systems, someone who had been there when everything happened. Professor Alim lived on the edge of the city in a house filled with books, real paper books, not digital files. He was ancient by Vorlon standards, his scales faded to pale gray and his movements slow but deliberate. Dara had studied under him years ago, learning the art of historical analysis and proper documentation. He had taught her to question sources and look for contradictions. When she showed up at his door unannounced, he simply nodded and let her inside. "I wondered when someone would come asking questions," he said, leading her to his study. The room was chaos organized into piles. Stacks of papers covered every surface, data crystals scattered like precious stones across his desk. Dara showed him what she had found, the ship manifests that did not match, the surveillance equipment disguised as scientific tools, the 12 years of observation before contact. He listened without interrupting, his old eyes growing darker as she spoke. "I was part of the original contact assessment team," Alim finally said. 50 years ago when all of this happened. I was young then, just assigned to my first major diplomatic mission." He moved to a locked cabinet in the corner and pulled out a small storage device. The technology was outdated, the kind that had not been used in decades. He plugged it into an ancient reader and files began to load onto his display screen. "Operation Silent Harvest was not just about Earth," he explained. "It was the standard procedure for any species approaching space travel capability. The Council would establish surveillance networks, monitor communications, study military capacity and social structures. The goal was to make contact only when a species could be properly guided into the galactic community." "Guided?" Dara asked. "You mean controlled?" Alim nodded slowly. The Council believed that young civilizations needed direction. Left to develop on their own, they might become threats or destabilize the existing power structures. So we watched them. We learned their weaknesses. We calculated the perfect moment to reveal ourselves. He pulled up files that showed the full scope of the Earth surveillance program. It had started when humans first developed radio technology. The Council had detected their electromagnetic emissions and classified them as a species of interest. Over the next century, they had placed observation posts throughout the solar system, on asteroids on Mars, hidden in the debris fields beyond Neptune. The surveillance network was massive, 327 separate installations, each one collecting data and transmitting it back to Council intelligence. They monitored Earth's internet traffic, intercepted military communications, tracked every satellite launch and weapons test. They knew more about humanity than humans knew about themselves. The plan was to make contact in late 2157, Olim said. The assessment showed humans were reaching a critical point in their development. They were on the verge of establishing permanent colonies on Mars. Once they spread beyond Earth, they would be harder to influence. So the contact committee decided it was time. Dara looked at the timeline. The official first contact had happened in early 2155, 2 years before the planned date. What changed? The humans found us first, Olim said simply. He showed her a file she had not seen before, a report from a human scientist named Dr. Rebecca Stone. She worked at something called the SETI Institute, searching for signs of alien intelligence. But instead of finding signals from distant stars, she found something much closer to home. Dr. Stone had noticed anomalies in Earth's satellite network, tiny fluctuations in data transmission, microsecond delays that should not exist. She spent months analyzing the patterns, thinking it was just equipment malfunction or interference from solar radiation. But the patterns were too consistent, too organized. She realized someone was intercepting Earth's communications. Every satellite relay, every deep space transmission, everything was being copied and sent somewhere else. She traced the signals and found the first observation post hidden on a small asteroid in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. Once they found one, they found them all, Olim said. Humans are exceptional at pattern recognition. They mapped the entire network within 6 months, and they kept it secret. They did not announce it to their public. They did not try to communicate with the posts. They just watched and planned. Dara felt cold despite the warm air in the study. The Council did not know humans had discovered the surveillance. We had no idea, Olim admitted. Our intelligence analysts were so confident in the stealth technology. It had worked on 40 other species over 600 years. No one ever detected it before contact was made. But humans were different. They were paranoid in a useful way. They assumed hostile intent and prepared accordingly. He pulled up the final report, the one that had been classified at the highest level, the one that explained what really happened during first contact. Earth did not fire on peaceful exploration vessels. There were no exploration vessels. What the Council called a diplomatic mission was actually a response team sent to investigate why the surveillance network had gone silent. Because the humans had destroyed it, all of it. Every single observation post, every relay station, every hidden sensor. In a coordinated strike lasting just 48 hours, they had eliminated 327 separate installations across their entire solar system. The casualties were intelligence operatives, Olim said quietly. Not diplomats, not scientists, spies who had been caught in the act. Dara stared at the data, her 3 eyes trying to process the magnitude of the deception. Why did the Council lie about what happened? Because the truth was worse than the violence, Olim said. It showed that our methods were flawed, that a pre-contact species could outsmart our intelligence services, that humans had every right to defend themselves against unwanted observation. If that truth came out, every species in the Council would start questioning how they were contacted. How many others were surveilled without consent? How many were manipulated into joining? He showed her one final file, a recording from the Council emergency session held immediately after Earth's strike. She listened to the debate, heard the fear in their voices as they discussed humanity's capabilities and what it meant for Council's superiority. And she heard High Chancellor Voren make the decision to lie. Dr. Rebecca Stone stood before the Emergency Council of World Leaders and tried not to think about how surreal this moment was. 6 months ago, she had been searching for radio signals from distant civilizations. Now she was explaining to the most powerful people on Earth that aliens had been watching them for over a decade. The secure bunker beneath Geneva was packed with officials, military advisors, and scientists. Every major government had representatives present, connected through quantum-encrypted channels that hopefully the Watchers could not intercept. Hopefully. Rebecca did not trust anything anymore. "They have been here since at least 2143, she said, her presentation floating in holographic form above the conference table. "We have identified 327 separate installations throughout the solar system. Each one is equipped with advanced signal interception technology. They are recording everything. Every phone call, every email, every classified military transmission." Admiral David Cruz from the United Earth Defense Initiative leaned forward. His face looked like it had been carved from stone. "Show them the Mars facility." Rebecca switched the display. The image showed a structure buried beneath the Martian surface near Olympus Mons. It had been there for at least 30 years, predating humanity's first crewed mission to the Red Planet by a decade. The facility was small but sophisticated, designed to monitor Earth from the perfect vantage point. "They watched us land our first astronauts on Mars," Rebecca said quietly. "They watched us establish our research stations. They were there the whole time, invisible and silent." The French president spoke up, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Have they made any attempt at communication? Any sign that their intentions are peaceful?" "No," Rebecca answered. "These are not first contact probes. They are surveillance networks. The technology is designed to remain hidden, not to reach out. They want us ignorant of their presence while they collect intelligence on our species." Admiral Cruz stood and took control of the presentation. His background was in cybersecurity and strategic defense. He had spent the last 3 months analyzing the alien technology from every angle, looking for weaknesses. "The good news is they are overconfident," he said. "Their stealth systems are incredibly advanced, but they assume we lack the capability to detect them. Once we knew what to look for, mapping the network became straightforward. They have not changed their encryption in years. They do not think we are a threat." He pulled up technical schematics that Rebecca barely understood. The Admiral had a gift for breaking down complex systems into their vulnerable points. He had already identified exactly how to disable every single installation simultaneously. "We can take them all out," he said, "but we need to make a decision about what happens next. Do we wait for them to contact us on their terms, or do we send a message they cannot?" "Ignore." The debate that followed was intense. The Brazilian ambassador argued that destroying the network was an act of war against a clearly superior force. Better to wait, gather more intelligence, and prepare diplomatic channels. The Japanese Minister of Defense countered that being passive while under surveillance was accepting victim status. Humanity needed to show strength, not weakness. The Indian Prime Minister raised a point that made everyone pause. "These aliens have technology centuries beyond ours. They could have destroyed us at any time, yet they chose to watch instead. Perhaps they are simply cautious, waiting to see if we are ready for contact." "Then why hide?" Rebecca asked. "Why spy? Cautious species send obvious probes and wait for responses. These aliens have been conducting covert intelligence operations. That indicates hostile intent or, at minimum, malicious manipulation." Admiral Cruz pulled up historical files from the alien database they had managed to decrypt. It was incomplete, but what they found was disturbing. References to 40 other species, integration protocols, readiness assessments. The language was clinical and controlling. "They have done this before," the Admiral said. Many times, they watch per-contact civilizations assess their weaknesses and time their appearance for maximum influence. This is not exploration. This is colonization through manipulation. The Russian minister spoke for the first time, his voice cold and pragmatic. If we destroy their surveillance network, what stops them from retaliating? We are infants compared to their capabilities. Nothing stops them, Admiral Cruz admitted. But if we do nothing, we enter first contact from a position of complete disadvantage. They will know everything about us while we know nothing about them. That asymmetry is more dangerous than any military threat. Rebecca watched the faces around the table. Fear competed with anger, caution with pride. These were people used to being in control of their world, and the revelation that unknown aliens had been watching them for years had shattered that confidence. The American president finally spoke, her words carrying the weight of decision. Dr. Stone, you said you can trace where these facilities are sending their data. Can you identify their home world or base of operations? Not precisely, Rebecca answered, but we know the general direction. Multiple systems in the galactic arm spinward from our position. They are part of a larger civilization, probably a federation or alliance of species. Then here is what we do, the president said. We disable every installation simultaneously, but we also broadcast a message on every frequency we can generate. We tell them exactly why we did it. We make it clear that we know we were under surveillance, that we consider it a hostile act, and that any future contact must be open and honest or not happen at all. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Humanity would strike first, not out of aggression, but out of refusal to be prey. The operation launched 72 hours later. Rebecca watched from the command center as military strike teams and automated weapons platforms moved into position across the solar system. Each alien installation was simultaneously targeted by multiple redundant systems. The humans were taking no chances. At exactly 400 Greenwich Mean Time, every surveillance post went dark. Kinetic impactors, electromagnetic pulses, and cyber attacks hit the network in perfect synchronization. Within minutes, 12 years of alien observation infrastructure was reduced to debris and dead electronics. Then came the broadcast. Rebecca had helped write it, choosing words carefully to convey strength without unnecessary aggression. To whoever has been watching us, we know you are there. We know you have been observing us without consent for over a decade. This is not acceptable. If you wish to make contact with humanity, come openly and honestly or do not come at all. We will not be studied like specimens in a lab. We will not be assessed for our readiness to join your civilization. If you approach us again in secret, we will consider it an act of war. The message repeated in every electromagnetic frequency, broadcast from arrays across Earth and its colonies. It would reach the alien civilization in years, but the destroyed surveillance network would deliver the message immediately. Now humanity waited to see if the Watchers would respond with understanding or violence. High Chancellor Vorin received the emergency alert while attending a cultural exhibition on the Telvari homeworld. His personal communicator vibrated with the priority code reserved for existential threats. Invasion, plague, diplomatic catastrophe. He excused himself from the gallery and took the call in a private chamber. All surveillance assets in the Sol system have gone offline, the intelligence director said without preamble. Every single installation, simultaneously. Vorin felt his throat sacs constrict, a Telvari stress response he had trained himself to suppress in public. Equipment failure, solar event. Coordinated military strike, the director replied. The humans found us, all of us. The emergency session convened within the hour. Council representatives from 40 species gathered in the secure chamber, their holographic forms flickering as the quantum network struggled to maintain connections across such vast distances. Vorin looked at their faces and saw the same emotion reflected everywhere. Shock, disbelief, and underneath it all, fear. How is this possible? Demanded the Quellan military liaison. Her species had designed the stealth systems used throughout the galaxy. Those observation posts are undetectable by pre-contact civilizations. We have used this technology for 600 years. The intelligence director pulled up tactical reports showing the systematic destruction of each installation. The humans discovered anomalies in their satellite network, signal delays measured in microseconds. Any other species would have dismissed it as background noise or equipment error. The humans investigated. They are exceptionally good at pattern recognition and paranoid enough to assume hostile intent. But even finding one post should not have exposed the entire network, another counselor objected. The systems are isolated, independently powered. Apparently, human intelligence services are more capable than we assessed, the director said. Once they found the first installation, they used its design to predict where others would be located. They mapped our entire surveillance infrastructure in under 6 months, and they did it quietly. We never detected their investigation. Admiral Torum of the Council Fleet stood, his 4 arms gesturing in agitation. We should respond with force. They destroyed billions of credits worth of equipment and killed Council personnel. This is an act of war. Against whom? Vorin asked quietly. We were conducting covert surveillance of their planet without permission. Under galactic law, they have the right to self-defense. The chamber erupted in argument. Some species had built their entire diplomatic strategy around the observation. An integration protocol. The idea that a primitive species could detect and destroy the network threatened everything they believed about their technological superiority. Vorin let them argue for 10 minutes before calling for silence. He had been playing political games for 3 decades, long enough to recognize when fear was masquerading as anger. Let us assess the situation logically, he said. The humans detected technology that should have been invisible to them. They located over 300 separate installations across their entire solar system. They destroyed all of them simultaneously with 0 casualties on their side. Then they broadcast a message telling us exactly why they did it. He played the human transmission for the council. The words were blunt and direct. No apologies, no attempts at diplomacy, just a clear statement of boundaries and a warning about future violations. They knew about us for 6 months, and we never detected their investigation, Vorin continued. They reverse-engineered our technology well enough to find vulnerabilities. They coordinated a military operation across their entire solar system with perfect timing. Does this sound like a primitive species to anyone? The silence that followed was heavy with implication. The Galactic Council had built its power structure on the assumption that younger civilizations needed guidance and control. The humans had just demonstrated they could outsmart Council intelligence services and outfight Council technology. What do we know about their military capability now? Vorin asked the defense analyst. The analyst looked uncomfortable. Our surveillance focused on social and political intelligence, not military capacity. We assumed their weapons were primitive, but the strike on our installations showed sophisticated targeting systems, advanced kinetics, and cyber warfare capability that rivals our own. They were building weapons, the Telvari science minister said slowly. While we watched them and assessed their readiness, they were preparing to fight us. Vorin nodded. And we missed it because we were overconfident. We believed our own propaganda about primitive species being helpless and confused. The humans proved us wrong. The head of Council Intelligence spoke up, her voice strained. If we admit the truth that we conducted surveillance without consent and the humans defended themselves, it will raise questions about every other integration. 40 species joined the Council through the observation protocol. Some might demand investigations into their own first contact experiences. She is right, another counselor said. The stability of the entire council structure depends on younger species trusting our guidance. If they learn we manipulate them into compliance, we could face rebellion across multiple sectors. Vorin saw the fear crystallizing into consensus. Truth was too dangerous. The humans had to be made into villains, not victims defending themselves. "We need a narrative that preserves council authority," he said, already working through the political calculations. "The humans destroyed peaceful exploration vessels. They attacked without provocation. We portray them as dangerous and irrational, too unstable for galactic contact." "But the humans will dispute that story," someone objected. "They have the evidence. They know what we were doing." "And who will believe them?" Vorin countered. "A precontact species claiming the entire Galactic Council is lying. We control the historical records, the communications networks, the diplomatic channels. We isolate Earth, restrict contact, and wait for them to die out or become irrelevant. In a few generations, no one will remember the truth except the humans, and no one listens to isolated species." The vote was swift, 40 species agreeing to rewrite history because the truth was too destabilizing. Vorin watched them cast their approval and felt nothing. This was politics. This was survival. The humans had forced their hand by being too competent, too aware. Now they would pay the price for refusing to be controlled. "Draft the official report," he ordered. 200 council personnel killed in an unprovoked attack. Peaceful diplomatic mission met with violence. Humanity designated as a hostile species under quarantine protocols until they demonstrate civilized behavior. The lie was constructed with the same precision the humans had used to destroy the surveillance network. Every detail carefully crafted, every contradiction smoothed away. Within days, the official history would be distributed across the galaxy, and the truth would become classified at the highest levels. Vorin believed the situation was contained. He believed the humans could be isolated and controlled through narrative rather than surveillance. What he did not know was that one counselor in the emergency session had been recording everything, and that recording was already being copied to a secure location, waiting for the day someone would care enough to look for it. Dara sat in her apartment for 3 days after Alim showed her the recording. She called in sick to work, claiming a respiratory infection that her species was prone to during seasonal changes. In reality, she could not stop thinking about the weight of what she now knew. 50 years of lies, an entire galactic civilization built on deception and manipulation, and she held the proof in a data crystal small enough to hide in her palm. Alim had kept the recording secret for 5 decades. He was the junior representative from Vorla during the emergency session, young and idealistic enough to be horrified by what his government agreed to do. He had recorded everything on a personal device, hidden it away, and waited. Waited for what he could not say. Justice? Redemption? Someone brave enough to use it. "I am old now," he had told Dara. "My career is over, my reputation already cemented, but yours is just beginning. If you expose this, they will destroy everything you have built. Your job, your standing, your future. The Council does not forgive whistleblowers." Dara looked at the data crystal sitting on her desk. Such a small thing to contain such devastating information. She thought about the human ambassador she had seen on news broadcasts, a woman named Director Helen Park who spent 20 years arguing that Earth's actions were justified self-defense. Everyone dismissed her as biased, as making excuses for her violent species. The historical consensus was clear. Humans attacked first. Humans were dangerous. But Director Park had been telling the truth the entire time. On the 4th day, Dara noticed the surveillance. It was subtle, but her species had excellent peripheral vision. The same person sitting in the cafe across from her building for hours. A maintenance worker who seemed more interested in her door than the actual repairs. Her personal communications had a slight lag, suggesting monitoring. They were watching her just like they had watched the humans. The irony was not lost on her. She contacted Alim through a secure channel he had set up decades ago, one that routed through 17 different relay points. "They are following me. They know I have something." "Then you need to decide." Quickly, Alim said. "Either destroy the evidence and hope they leave you alone, or use it before they take it from you. If I go public, they will arrest me. They will claim the recording is fabricated. One person against the entire council structure has no chance." You are right, Olim agreed. One person cannot win against an institution, but you are not one person. You have connections, friends, colleagues across the archives network, young archivists who still believe in truth over politics. Dara thought about her network. She had spent years building relationships with record keepers on dozens of worlds. They trusted her. They valued her work. Some of them had expressed quiet doubts about official histories, questions they were too afraid to voice openly. I need to fragment the data, she said, thinking out loud. Send pieces to different people with instructions to release if I am silenced. Make it impossible to suppress. That is a start, Olim said. But you need more than that. You need a public action that forces the council to respond. Something they cannot ignore or classify. Dara spent the next 2 days preparing. She created 50 separate packages, each containing a portion of the evidence along with clear instructions. The emergency session recording was split into segments. The surveillance files, the ship manifests, the communication logs showing 12 years of observation. Everything fragmented and encrypted with release protocols. She sent the packages through untraceable channels to archivists she trusted, journalists who had reputations for investigating controversial stories, even some low-level council staffers who she knew harbored doubts about official narratives. Each package had a dead man's switch. If Dara failed to check in every 72 hours, the data would automatically release to public networks. Then she recorded her own message. She sat in front of a camera and explained everything: who she was, what she had found, why it mattered. She kept her voice steady and presented the evidence methodically, like the trained historian she was. This was not emotional manipulation. This was documentation. The Galactic Council has lied for 50 years about what happened at Earth, she said to the camera. They conducted covert surveillance of a pre-contact civilization, and when that civilization defended itself, the Council rewrote history to hide their own. Misconduct, I have evidence of this deception. I am releasing it now because the truth matters more than my safety or career. She uploaded the message to a dozen different distribution networks, scheduled to release simultaneously. Then she did something that surprised even herself. She walked directly to Council Security Headquarters and requested an audience with the Investigation Division. The officers who met her seemed confused. People did not usually turn themselves in for possessing classified information. They escorted her to an interview room and left her there for 2 hours, probably consulting with their superiors about protocol. When the senior investigator finally arrived, he looked more tired than angry. "Archivist Dara, we have been looking for you." "I know," she said. "You have been following me for days. It was not subtle." He sat across from her, his expression professionally neutral. "You accessed restricted files. You copied classified information. You understand these are serious violations." "I do," Dara said. "I am here to demand a public hearing about what those files contain. I want council representatives to explain on record why surveillance operations against Earth were classified as peaceful exploration. I want High Chancellor Vorin to answer questions about the emergency session where the decision to lie was made." The investigator blinked, his composure cracking slightly. "You do not get to demand anything. You are under investigation." "Then investigate," Dara said calmly. "But while you process paperwork and file charges, the information I found is already spreading. I sent copies to 50 different individuals across the galaxy. If I am arrested or silenced, it releases automatically to public networks. Your only option is to address the evidence openly." She watched him realize that she had trapped the council in a choice between bad options. Arrest her and confirm they have something to hide, or engage with the evidence and risk the truth coming out anyway. "You have made a serious mistake," the investigator said quietly. "No," Dara replied. "The council made the mistake 50 years ago. I am just the one who found proof." They kept her in custody for 18 hours before the first fragments of data began appearing on independent news networks. Then the emergency session recording hit major outlets. Within 48 hours, the story was spreading faster. then the council could contain it. Dara sat in her detention cell and waited to see if the galaxy cared more about comfortable lies or uncomfortable truth. The first broadcast appeared on a small independent news network based in the outer colonies. Within an hour, it had spread to major outlets across 12 sectors. By the end of the day, half the galaxy had seen the emergency session recording. High Chancellor Vorin watched his carefully constructed narrative collapse in real time. News anchors who had spent 50 years repeating the official history now questioned everything. Council representatives faced angry calls demanding explanations. Protests erupted on 3 core worlds within the first week. The recording was devastating because it was undeniable. Those were real council voices making real decisions to hide the truth. The surveillance files showed years of covert observation. The ship manifests proved the so-called peaceful exploration vessels were equipped with military intelligence technology. Every piece of evidence reinforced the central claim that humanity had been watched, assessed, and lied about. "We need to issue a statement," Vorin's communications director said during an emergency strategy meeting. "The silence is making everything worse." "What statement?" Vorin demanded. "That we did exactly what the evidence shows we did, that we manipulated first contact for 40 species over 6 centuries, that our entire diplomatic framework is built on deception." The director had no answer. The truth was indefensible and the lie was already exposed. Meanwhile, other species began asking uncomfortable questions. The Quellan Assembly demanded a review of their own first contact records. The Marindi discovered references to observation protocols in old files they had never examined before. Species after species started investigating whether they too had been surveilled and manipulated before joining the council. The political structure that had seemed stable for centuries began showing cracks. On Earth, Director Helen Park watched the chaos unfold from her small office in the human diplomatic quarter. For 20 years, she had argued that her people defended themselves against hostile surveillance. For 20 years, the council had dismissed her as a biased advocate making excuses for violence. Now the galaxy was learning she had been right all along. Her communicator chimed with an unexpected message. The council wanted to meet with her, not for a formal diplomatic session but for a private conversation. She almost laughed. After 2 decades of being ignored and patronized, suddenly they wanted to talk. She accepted the meeting because it was her job, not because she felt any obligation to make this easier for them. The conference room was nearly empty when she arrived. Just Vorin and 2 of his senior advisors. The High Chancellor looked older than his public appearances suggested, his scales dull with stress. "Director Park," he said without preamble, "we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation." "You find yourselves caught in a lie," Helen corrected. "There is nothing unprecedented about that. The only unusual thing is that someone finally proved it." Vorin's throat sacs contracted, the Telvari equivalent of a wince. "The Council is considering reform measures, transparency protocols, review of historical first contact procedures, public accountability structures." "How generous," Helen said. "And what does this have to do with Earth?" "We would like to extend a formal invitation for humanity to join the Galactic Council as full members with voting rights," one of the advisors said. "No probationary period, no restricted access, complete integration." Helen studied them carefully. This was not reconciliation. This was damage control. They wanted to bring humanity inside the structure where they could be managed, where human testimony about surveillance could be framed as past mistakes rather than ongoing patterns. "You understand that accepting this invitation would require us to trust you," she said. "After 12 years of covert surveillance followed by 50 years of lies about what happened when we defended ourselves, you are asking for trust from a species you spent decades portraying as violent and irrational." "We acknowledge the injustice done to your people," Vorin said stiffly. "The memorial to the casualties of the Earth incident will be revised to reflect historical accuracy. Your ambassador's statements will be formally recognized as truthful. We are prepared to issue public apologies." "Apologies are words," Helen said. "What are you offering in terms of actual accountability?" The negotiations took 3 weeks. Helen refused to make it easy for them, insisting on concrete changes rather than symbolic gestures. The council wanted humanities, legitimacy to help stabilize the political chaos. Helen wanted guarantees that no species would ever be surveilled without consent again. In the end, they reached an agreement. Humanity would join the council with full rights and a seat on the Security Committee. In exchange, Earth would support the new transparency accords that mandated open first contact protocols and banned covert surveillance of pre-contact civilizations. The accords included enforcement mechanisms with real consequences, not just guidelines that could be ignored. Director Park met with Dara 3 days before the official signing ceremony. The young archivist had been released from detention after public pressure made her arrest politically impossible. She had become a symbol of truth over institutional loyalty, celebrated by reform movements across the galaxy. They sat in a quiet garden on the archive world, surrounded by flowering plants that changed color with the light. "I wanted to thank you," Helen said. "What you did took extraordinary courage." "I just showed people evidence that already existed," Dara replied. "The courage was yours, spending 20 years arguing for truth when no one would listen." "It was easier for me," Helen said. "I was defending my own people. You had nothing personal at stake except your principles." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching other visitors walk the garden paths. "Can humans forgive the galaxy?" Dara asked quietly. 50 years of being called violent and dangerous, 50 years of isolation based on lies, that is a lot to move past. Helen considered the question carefully. Humans have a complicated relationship with forgiveness. We do not forget easily. But we also understand that institutions are made of individuals, and individuals can change. The council that lied is not the same council that is implementing reforms now. "That sounds like political diplomacy rather than personal truth," Dara observed. Helen smiled. "You are perceptive. The personal truth is harder. Many humans are angry. They feel violated by the surveillance and betrayed by the lies. But we also recognize that holding on to anger forever prevents moving forward. We struck first because we refuse to be victims. We are joining the council now because we believe in second chances, even for those who wronged us." "That is surprisingly hopeful," Dara said. "Humans are good at hope," Helen replied, "even when it is not entirely justified. We tend to believe people and institutions can be better than they are. Sometimes that makes us naive, but sometimes it creates the possibility for real change." The signing ceremony happened on neutral ground, a station at the edge of council space. Representatives from every species gathered to witness humanity's formal integration and the adoption of the Transparency Accords. The speeches were long and full of diplomatic language about new eras and shared futures. But the real moment came after the formalities ended, when Dara and Helen stood together watching the crowd disperse. "The hard work starts now," Helen said. "Building real trust, creating actual accountability, making sure this never happens again." "At least now we are starting from truth instead of lies," Dara replied. Helen nodded. That was enough. The galaxy had reeled from the revelation, institutions had cracked, and the comfortable narrative of council benevolence had shattered. But from that destruction came the possibility of something better. Not perfect, not without ongoing struggle, but honest. And for species that had spent centuries hiding behind deception, honesty was a revolution all by itself.